Hello, everybody. I'm Laura Washington with the CAYL Institute. We're so glad that you're here for our webinar today. We offer these webinars on the first Thursday of every month at 4 o'clock Eastern Time to talk to you about essential questions that we're facing for families, for children, and for the field of early childhood education. Now, all of our webinars are free, they're recorded, they're available on our website. And this is a way that everyone can join our community regardless of their schedule or regardless of their location. At the end of our webinar, we ask you to please join a link if you want to have a live question and answer session with our guest. During this webinar, closed captioning is available, but after this webinar also, you'll get an email which will give you more resources on the topic we're talking about today, which is family engagement. For the past 20 years, the CAYL Institute has been working to advance the next generation of early childhood education leaders. And you can learn more about our work by looking at our website, by visiting our social media platforms, or watching our YouTube channel. While many of our services and products are absolutely offered to you without cost, they are not free. And so we would really like it if you would make a donation to the CAYL Institute for any amount. We're very delighted that our audience has reached all 50 states. And in fact, people from 59 countries have participated in our webinars. So we really hope to continue offering these webinars to you in your local community as well as all around the world. And as we plan our webinars, we really like to have your feedback on the speakers and topics that you'd like to hear. So we're going to drop in the chat a little survey and ask you to complete it and tell us what you'd like to know more about. As we hear from you, we know that you face many important issues as you think about the way forward in 2025. And last month's webinar, we talked about the importance of inclusion, belonging, and equity for all children. And one way that we can really make sure that there's inclusion and belonging and equity is to really have a strong engagement with families. And so as you join this webinar today, we ask you to write in the chat. We'd like to know, what have you noticed about families that you're working with nowadays? We'd also like to know what you think are the most effective ways that we as educators can work with families. It would be very rare for anyone in our field to deny that parent engagement is very important. Yet, as been demonstrated in a recent study by Deborah Gross and her colleagues, this general agreement about how important family engagement is really isn't shown in practice. So we're concerned about that. When this study asked parents and teachers and administrators to define and operationalize parent engagement, they got a lot of different answers, which really demonstrated there's a lot of lack of clarity about what parent engagement really could be to be absolutely phenomenal. And when there is a lack of clarity, this means that some of the strategies that we're using lack meaning, they lack depth, and they're not necessarily useful. In fact, in this study, when they asked people to tell them about what parent engagement was, a lot of people were putting the responsibility on parents rather than really showing that it was a shared responsibility. Yet we know that effective parent engagement has to be a collaborative two-way process. It can't just be a frivolous afterthought. It can really be a phenomenal part of a child's success. So what would actually make family engagement phenomenal? Well, first of all, family engagement is phenomenal when it's built on respectful relationships. And these relationships have to be built on trust, on sharing positive, important information about the child. And when we really realize that some families have circumstances that limit or make it difficult for them to engage in programs, maybe the way that we might like them to do, but we can find alternative ways to engage them. Second, phenomenal family engagement has to facilitate meaningful participation by everyone. So we as the educators can provide resources and support on the child development, on community resources. But at the same time, we have to recognize and value the family's contributions and acknowledge and appreciate their efforts and their expertise. Third, we know that family engagement can be phenomenal when we foster collaboration and a shared sense of community. So, yes, we are offering resources. We can help families engage and know a lot about what we're doing with children in our program. But at the same time, we can collaborate with families on social events and opportunities for them to connect with each other. And most importantly, we have to find avenues for parents to contribute to decision making in our program. And finally, family engagement can be phenomenal when we are really aware of the cultural context of family life. So, respectful relationships respect where families are coming from, whatever cultural differences may exist. And we find ways of keeping them informed and connected by communicating and connecting with their community resources and community centers, libraries, museums, local businesses, and form those partnerships that really matter to families. So we're delighted that today we are really going to have an opportunity to deepen our thinking about family engagement with a phenomenal panel of experts who are going to share ideas with you. Today we have Dr. Karen Mapp, who is a professor of practice at Harvard Graduate School of Education. We have Andrea Maldonado, who is the director of quality assessment for the National Association for Family Child Care. And we have Kiera Cheney, who is a curriculum designer at the Waterford organization. So let's begin by hearing from one of our nation's foremost thinkers, practitioners, and researchers on family engagement, Dr. Karen Mapp. Karen, we are so delighted to welcome you to the CAYL Catalyst webinar series today. Welcome.
Thank you so much, Laura. I appreciate it. And can you all hear me? I think that's the first thing I want to ask.
Yes.
Yes, you can hear me. Okay, great. I am in Verona, Italy. And so consequently, it's a little late here, but that's okay. I really wanted to be participating in this webinar series. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and first of all, I've got to get my PowerPoint to behave. So I think it's going to do that. I want to share my screen. So let me go back and share my screen. Okay, here we go. And I'm gonna put this on presenter view. Okay, so can everyone see? Laura, could you let me know if you can see it? Just want to check. Okay, good, perfect. Thank you so much. So as Laura said, I've been doing research on family engagement now for quite some time. It's been about 30 years that I've been doing this work. And so I'm going to share with you very quickly what I've learned. I've not only done research on family and community engagement, but I've also practiced as a deputy superintendent for family and community engagement from 2003 to 2005 in Boston. And I also was very honored to do some work when Barack Obama was president to work with the U.S. Department of Education to help them strategize on how they could share what we knew about best practice with family engagement for the country. So I'm going to share some of that with you today. What I've learned in the last 30 years is that in order to actually change policy and practice around family engagement and to change mindsets about family engagement around particularly the importance of it, there are really three spaces, three areas that I had to not only research, but also find a way to share in a user-friendly fashion with the field what we knew. So the first thing that people want to know is why. Why is family engagement important? And some of you on this call may remember the good old Wendy's commercial, Where's the Beef? Where Clara Peller and her friends wanted to know, if I'm going to spend my resources on this hamburger, then I need to know what the return on investment is going to be. So people have always wanted to know, why is engagement important? What is the impact of engagement? Second area is what does actually effective family engagement look like? And so I've spent time writing case studies, featuring places around the country and the world that do this work well. But what I found out is that it's not enough to just showcase effective practice. You have to really explain how they are doing it. So these are the three areas that I've really inhabited over the last 30 years. And I am in a semi-public place. So if you hear a little bit of background noise, I apologize for that. One of the things that I realized we had to do was we had to start with our own core beliefs. And I do this work with practitioners. I have a full course at the Harvard Graduate School of Education for practitioners on family engagement. And what we really have to start with is our own self-reflection. How do we feel about our families? What do we think about when we think about our families? Because in many cases, a lot of our educators and other practitioners are working with families from communities that are very different from their own. And consequently, sometimes because they may be using family engagement practices that don't work well, when they don't, they blame the parents. And so we start with this, and this was featured in a book that I did about 20 years ago called Beyond the Bake Sale. And the four core beliefs are, first of all, you've got to believe that all families have dreams for their children and really want the best for them. And a lot of people get hung up on the all, but we say all kids can learn. And that is the belief that we have when we go into schools to teach our children. So we have to start with a belief that all our families really have dreams for their children. We also have to understand that all parents have the capacity to support their children's learning. And where people get hung up on this one sometimes is that word capacity. They think capacity means resources. And so they'll say, not all families have the resources. Right, but that's not what this word says. It says capacity. And that means that many of our parents, because of their knowledge of their children, their knowledge of the community, that's capacity. So we have to honor that funds of knowledge that our families have. Parents and school staff should be equal partners. We want to see our families as partners. And then, because of histories of harm that may have been done by schools and other institutions, we really have to be, the educators have to be the ones that extend that first hand, because for a lot of our families, they may have actually gone to the schools where their children are now attending. And if things didn't go that well for them, they're going to carry those ghosts from those experiences. So what we have to do as educators and practitioners is really be the first ones to extend the hand and say, welcome. We really do see you as partners. I wanted to also talk a little bit about the difference between involvement versus engagement. Again, from the research that I've done over the last 30 years, we really see that people think that involvement is the same thing as engagement, and it really isn't. And I don't have time to really go over all of these, but if you take a look at this, you're going to see that involvement is really sort of a one-way street where we're talking at our families. We have a wonderful educator named Larry Filazzo, and he talks about involvement. You lead with your mouth. You're talking at families. You're telling them what to do. The relationship is very transactional. It's very one way. Whereas engagement is really a reciprocal relationship. It's where we are working together in partnership. Our communication is two-way, and we're really pulling our families in to co-create the learning spaces for our children. So this is very important to really start to see. And, some people, we understand they start with involvement, when we do our bake sales and our cookouts and our potlucks and things like that, where we're sort of basically entertaining our families. That's not really the same as engagement, because engagement is really what moves the needle on student achievement. So I mentioned to you that I worked for the U.S. Department of Education back in 2011 to 2013. And what they asked me to do was to design a framework that would help our practitioners and our families really see what does effective family engagement practice actually look like. And so this is called the dual capacity framework for family and school partnerships. And what you'll notice is it's set up kind of like a logic model. Logic models always start with the challenge. And you'll see in this case that the educators and the families at the beginning of this are separated from one another. And what happens is that in the challenge is that a lot of our educators have not been trained on how to really work with families. It's a skill. And so they haven't been exposed to strong examples of engagement. They've received minimal training. And because of that, they may not see partnership as an essential practice, and they may actually develop deficit models of our families. And the same with our families, they haven't seen great examples of engagement either. They may have had negative experiences, as I mentioned. They may not feel valued and maybe feel disrespected by institutions like schools. So, what do we do? This is really the meat and potatoes of this dual capacity building framework, because from the research, this is a research-based framework, we've discovered that there are two sets of conditions, I call them the essential conditions, that have to be in place in order for us to see results. But these are also what we know are the building blocks for effective practice, high impact practice. And so the two sets of conditions are process conditions, which are the steps that all of us can take, but the organizational conditions are the conditions that the systems and structures have to put in place to hold up this good family engagement practice. In the process conditions, what I want to point out is the first thing that we really have to do that amazingly sometimes gets skipped over is that we really have to spend time building trust with our families. So, as I said, sometimes there's been harm, historical harm. One of my colleagues, Sue Hung, talks about generational disrespect that's happened for a lot of our families here in the United States. And I'm finding, doing work here in Italy, it's the same wherever you go. There's maybe been some sort of, there's disenfranchised families who may feel disconnected for all sorts of reasons. And this may have been happening for generations. So we've got to build trust. And that's where we have to start. And these are the elements of how we build trust with each other. We respect each other. We show each other that we're competent. We make sure we follow through so we have integrity, and we see each other as human beings. And that's what we call personal regard. And here's a wonderful quote from the book Trust in Schools, which is an oldie but goodie, done by Barbara Schneider and Anthony Bragg, where they say, relational trust sustains an ethical imperative among organizational members to advance the best interests of children. In this regard, relational trust constitutes a moral resource for school improvement. That's how important it is. It's a moral resource. You cannot do the work without it. In this book, they basically say, if you don't have a foundation of trust, nothing works. No amount of, the initiatives, the, fancy programs, nothing's going to work if it's not laid on a foundation of trust. So I tell my practitioners, you have to intentionally find ways to build trust with your families. We also know that it's really important for any of our family engagement initiatives to be linked to learning and development. Family engagement is a strategy for change and improvement. It's not a goal. A lot of times we see schools and districts will have, we want to improve grades and test scores. We want to lower chronic absenteeism. And we also want to do family engagement. No, the family engagement piece is what is a strategy to achieve those other goals. Because otherwise, sometimes it gets left off the table and people don't take it seriously. We also want to make sure our practice is asset-based. We see our families through an asset-based lens versus a deficit-based lens. All of our practices have to be culturally responsive and respectful. Again, we want to see our families as co-leaders and co-partners, so everything we do is collaborative. And then we want to make sure that our practice is interactive. Like I said, we don't want it just to be one way. We want it to be two-way. We want to be able to sit down at the table and work with our families. And so interactive is very important. That's actually how we best learn. I mentioned to you the organizational conditions, also very, very important, because our systems and structures have to be set up to support family engagement. Have we provided the resources? Is family engagement on the budget sheet? Because when it's not, people know that we're not taking it seriously. So when we put those conditions into place, what we see, because this is a dual capacity building framework, we see the capacity of the adults, both the families and the educators, start to change and be enhanced. And one of my colleagues, Monica Higgins, defines capacity in 4 ways. So we build our capacity around our skills and our knowledge, our capabilities. We build our capacity around our social networks and connections when we're working together in partnership. Our beliefs about each other change. There's a wonderful study that's been done that shows that when we work in partnership with our families, those biases that we may have about them dissolve. And then everybody's confidence is built. Our teachers, our educators, our families have more self-efficacy and confidence to be able to work together and to support children's learning. So what happens when we do these things? The first set of outcomes is the capacity that's built. But the next set is that now you'll see the difference between under the challenge, the families and the educators being separated, to now under the challenge, they're together. Educators now see family engagement as really important to learning and development. They understand that it's an essential condition and strategy. And now our families are now embraced and engaged as co-creators, as advocates, etc. And then why are we doing this? We are doing family and community engagement to really support our kids and support our schools. And so that's the framework. One of the things that I said earlier, that's a real reframe. We want people to think of family engagement as a strategy, and again, not as a goal in and of itself. It really is an absolute, and we know this from the research, it's absolutely essential to the success of schools and our students. And I just wanted to share a few resources with you. We actually have a week-long institute at Harvard in the summer, and we also will have another one in January of 2026. This is an opportunity for people to come and do a deep dive in the why and the what of the how of engagement. And then we also have a free online class. Yes, I said free. A free online class. This was just launched. We have two, but the new one on the dual capacity building framework was launched just this past May. All right, so I hope I stayed within my time, and I think I'm going to be turning this over to Angela.
Hello, good afternoon, everybody. And I hope you can hear me well as well. Thank you so much to the CAYL Institute for inviting me to speak on such an important topic. I have the privilege of working with educators, with agencies, and partners across the country to support and strengthen the quality in home-based early learning programs. What grounds me in this work is the belief that family child care educators are leaders, because they are. And they're not just nurturing children, they are building businesses. They are preserving culture, and on the coattails of Dr. Karen Mapp's introduction, they are they're living the difference between family involvement and engagement. And our accredited educators engage with families every day. At NAFCC, we focus on how to honor that work. We focus on recognizing quality through accreditation and ensuring that educators are supported, that they are respected, and that they are seen. When we talk about family engagement and early care and education, especially within the family child care system, we have to recognize that family child care educators do more than providing child care. They're engaging with families in three ways: building relationships, creating community, and holding space for both children and families to thrive together. I want to talk to you a little bit about the relationships, or the foundation rather, of quality, and it's through relationships. In the field of early childhood education, we often say that children thrive in the context of strong relationships. But in family child care, this isn't just about the theory, it is the foundation of this entire model. Family child care programs are small, home-based settings, and the educators and business owners who run these programs, they are caring for children across multiple years, sometimes from infancy all the way to school age and sometimes beyond. This continuity fosters trust, emotional safety, and deep connection. Again, all of the elements that Dr. Mapp was just speaking about. These relationships become a source of strength for the children and a cornerstone of support for their families and for that community. According to the Harvard Center on the Developing Child, responsive, dependable relationships between children and their caregivers are the single most powerful influence on healthy brain development. And who doesn't want that? Now, these serve and return interactions. When a caregiver responds warmly and consistently to children, they build the architecture of that brain. That child knows that this person is going to respond to my needs. This is supporting language development, social emotional regulation, and confidence that the world is a world that they feel safe in. And this is what makes family childcare programs so impactful. They create the consistency and emotionally secure environments where relationships are not an extra. They are the curriculum. I'm going to repeat that. These spaces are emotionally secure environments for young children. And these types of relationships are not accidental. They are the core of the relationships that the caregivers have with the children and with their families. I want to tell you a little bit about a developmental psychologist, Barbara Rogoff. She emphasizes that learning is really social. It's inherently social. Children learn best in the context of community and routines. They are guided, or rather, they learn best through guided participation, hands-on participation and engagement, and real-life problem solving. Family childcare programs where children of different ages learn together. It's a mixed age program and structure. Children are observing one another and they share in the daily experiences. This is a type of authentic learning that happens all day long, and families gravitate towards this because it is reminiscent of cultural and communal values. For example, older children will take on leadership roles. Younger children often benefit, or rather, younger children benefit from watching how the older children take on these leadership roles and they interact. Often, they will need to problem solve together in ways that the educators and the families deem the most appropriate, again, celebrating those cultural differences. Together, they are learning important lessons about empathy, about cooperation, and about independence. And this is the ecosystem, again, that is very reminiscent of societies that value the impact of communal learning, guided learning, and child rearing, where the little ones learn from their older siblings or maybe from older cousins. And it is organic and it is authentic to the many ways that our families grew up themselves. It's important to remind ourselves that mixed age interactions are not accidental. They are one of the many core strengths of family childcare models, and it is a unique strength of family childcare programs. And when we pair this with intention, grounding it in celebrating and responding to culturally responsive caregiving, and they deepen the family relationships, the result is organic, it's holistic, and it's with these environments that really reflect how children are wired to grow and celebrate and develop based on families' values. I want to talk to you a little bit about our most recent impact report with the National Association for Family Childcare, and also about our accreditation system that reflects a lot of these truths. First, I want to say that the NAFCC accreditation system, it is not a checklist. It is a pathway to intentional practice, professional growth, and stronger outcomes for both children and families. The accreditation is focused on 5 key content areas, and the family engagement is really embedded in all of these. We look when we assess at the educators to see whether or not they are ready for accreditation. We are looking to ensure that they are nurturing relationships with children and families, that they are supporting social, emotional, cognitive development through everyday routines and structure, that they are maintaining clear, respectful, and reciprocal communication with their families, and that they are affirming the cultures, language, and values of the families that they serve. Educators going through this accreditation system are invited to intentionally reflect on their relationships and partnerships with families, and then to refine their work in meaningful ways and in the strategies that Dr. Mapp was reviewing earlier. Some of these things might look like welcoming families into the learning spaces and planning so that the families can see firsthand the environments that their children are going to be working in, are going to be playing in, are going to be interacting in. We also make sure or assess the type of communication that that educators have with their families. We want to make sure that they are engaging in regular two-way communication with families and in a way that is respectful of the families and their preferred method of communicating. We are ensuring that the educators are making shared or inviting the families to make shared decisions around routines and goals. Families are the primary caregivers, the primary teachers for their children. We look at how educators are including families in program level decisions by inviting them to share their feedback. And we are looking at how educators are celebrating family heritage, celebrating stories, and celebrating traditions. So in other words, NAFCC accreditation helps the educators deepen what they are already doing well, and it offers them another framework to elevate, to grow, and expand the quality, while again reinforcing the power of relationships. I referenced the 2024 impact report before. I want to share a couple of details from this report that were really eye-opening to me. Our accredited educators through the National Association for Family Child Care are supporting over 43,000 children in their programs. We have over 1,100 accredited programs. And out of those 1,100 accredited programs, they are reaching and supporting over 43,000 children. NAFCC is also supporting over 56,000 family child care champions, community members, leaders, and more importantly, 71% of educators that are coming through the NAFCC accreditation reported that this accreditation process has been instrumental in enhancing their professionalism. This is about more than credentials. It is about feeling confident, respected, and connected to the broader movement for quality in home-based care. Which brings me to two shining examples of what parent and family engagement with the NAFCC accredited educators looks like in practice. The educators that I'm about to highlight are Annette Eberhardt and Lindaria. And they're not only exemplary educators, they are NAFCC accredited educators and leaders in their own right. And they show us how quality, how relationships and family engagement comes to life in their practice. First, I want to talk to you about Annette. And this is a beautiful example of how she leaves a legacy. Now, Annette is not only an NAFCC accredited educator, she is also the chair of our accreditation council, and her program is in Tampa, Florida. Annette runs Kids Are Us Family Childcare, and it is a 24/7 program that serves families working non-traditional hours. Yes, you heard that correctly, 24/7 program. Now, within this program, she's created a remarkable two-generational model where children, their parents, and even her own family have grown together in community. Annette's granddaughter, Nova, has been enrolled in her program since birth. Her families see this. They see the connectivity. They see the impact. They see a familiar face with Annette, with her staff. And they also see that the children, or rather parents, are so comfortable that they're coming to this program that the same parents that Annette cared for when they were children are now returning to her program with children of their own. Her home has been completely transformed. She converted her living room, her kitchen, her dining room, all into different play areas for her children. And more importantly, she's inviting families to share, to teach her about their children. She engages them on a human level. What Annette has built here is more than a program. It is an example of a legacy of love and a legacy of learning. In her mixed age setting, children learn from one another daily. Like I mentioned before, the younger ones are learning from the older children. Younger children are absorbing behavior and social cues from their peers. The environment is flexible, it is family-like, and it is intentional. And Annette's approach reflects exactly what Barbara Rogoff was describing before. It is authentic learning through shared routines and participation. And it shows how FCC educators, when they are supported through accreditation, they are deepening their ability to nurture the relationships. Now I want to talk to you a little bit about Lindelia. Lindelia's program is in Maryland. And Lindelia is not only an NAFCC accredited educator, but she serves multilingual and immigrant families, many of whom have been navigating the very complex challenges. She is offering not only education, but also connection. Lindelia is known for holding space for her families. And for many of the families that she is currently working with, this is a safe space, for a lack of a better term, for them to be able to turn to with questions, with concerns. Last spring, she was able to host a family concert, and this was not only a celebration of the children's growth and the family's involvement, but it was a way to share with her families, you matter, you belong, and your growth is worth celebrating. I also want to mention that Lindelia is participating in a joint collaboration effort with the Bainham Foundation and NAFCC. And through this joint partnership, she is starting to develop workshops and professional development opportunities for the families. Again, Lindelia's story reminds us that family childcare is not just about child development, it's about family development as well. I'm going to wrap up by just pointing out a couple of things that are true to both Lindelia's and also Annette's program, and that these are educators who are anchors in their communities. They speak the languages of the families that they serve. They're cooking familiar foods. They are celebrating cultural holidays. They are open when families need them most. And they are offering families a sense of home and belonging. These are everyday moments of relational care, and they happen in family child care programs every day. So I'm running short on time. I just want to close with this. Family child care educators are not just caregivers. They are educators, advocates, small business owners, culture keepers, and community leaders. They walk with families through celebrations, through challenges, and they create spaces where children are loved, challenged, and affirmed. And at NAFCC, we're standing alongside them. So to the families listening, you are not alone. Your FCC educator is not just a provider, they are a partner with you in this journey. You are your child's first teacher, and your voice, values, and culture are central to the learning process. To any advocates, funders, and policymakers in the room, these programs must be supported, not only to survive, but really to thrive. Because when we invest in family child care, we invest in relationships that raise our children, stabilize families, and strengthen the communities. Thank you all. I am going to now pass it on to Kiara.
Thank you so much. And I want to start this off by saying I'm so excited to continue this conversation. But before I begin, I just want to say how amazing it has been to hear from the Dr. Karen Mapp, Andrea Maldonado, and the educators and families that are participating on this call. It has been so uplifting to learn, grow, and become more intentional in serving our families. So thank you to the CAYL Institute. You may be wondering, who is Waterford.org? Well, for nearly 50 years, Waterford.org has been a leader in early learning. As a nonprofit, we are deeply committed to family engagement and to offering culturally relative curriculum where children see themselves reflected in the content that they engage with. Rooted in the science of reading and learning from the beginning, our work is backed by a long history of proven outcomes. While Waterford.org is a supplemental program for pre K through second graders supporting literacy, math, science, and mindset skills, our commitment extends beyond academics. We believe that building authentic relationships with families is the foundation of every child's education. And at Waterford.org, we do this in a lot of ways, and I'm going to cover a few today. Our family app allows families to see the academic progress of their child. So if a child needs extra support, let's say with phonological awareness skills, families have access to our resource portal where they can find specific resources and activities to support their learning gaps. These resources can include decodable books, learning together calendars that are available in English and in Spanish, and over 2,000 other resources. Our family app sends 3 messages a week to families, which includes skill gaps on Monday. On Wednesday, it's mindset messages. And, for example, what does it look like and sound like to be empathetic? And then on Friday, it could be a message about encouragement. We also have family engagement workshops, which are opportunities to provide families hands-on activities that support specific skills that are related to reading, math, STEM, and mindset skills. A few weeks ago, I had the privilege of leading a few sessions in Maryland, and out of the 3 sessions that I led, my favorite was understanding emotions and building self-awareness. Children's and family, they learned how to communicate their emotions, so to name their emotions. They learned calming strategies like belly breathing and balloon breathing. And they also learned how to communicate their emotions. So families were saying, well, I feel frustrated when I have to tell you something more than once. And children were saying, well, I'm frustrated when you yell at me, right? But there was an opportunity to provide families and children to communicate their emotions and connect and being their child's first teacher. We also have family academy cohorts, which are for 6, 10, or 20 weeks throughout the school year. And this gives families access to understand the pedagogy practices that we as educators are experts in. So for 60 to 90 minutes, our sessions are grounded in the science of reading pertaining to literacy, and then math and science and mindset, it's grounded in our instructional strands. And each cohort or session breaks down what specific terms are. I think we as educators sometimes forget that terms that are common to us may be overwhelming for families. And so families may not know what phonemic awareness is or what social awareness is or how it should be applied. So these sessions are invitational and engaging, and they give families access to partner with us in their child's education. So here are some of my favorite pictures from family engagement workshops and family academy cohorts that I have been a part of. A few weeks ago, I was preparing to lead sessions at the elementary school I just mentioned. And before I went, there were about 3 families that signed up. And I said, okay, I'm going to reach 3 families. I get to reach 3 families. But I also want to name this and be transparent. And I want to acknowledge that attendance may not always be 100%. You can post class dojo messages. You can send over 10 reminders home, or even plan a Wear Them Fans at line dancing event that correlates with sequencing activities. And attendance could still be low. But that doesn't mean that we should stop doing the work that we know all families deserve to have. So created a challenge that encompassed, okay, kids come, we'll have a donut party to the class that has the most participants that come. Let me tell you, I walked into that gym to get set up, or the cafeteria to get set up, and there were 16 families that came with 15 adults and 30 children. And the families spoke various languages from Pashto to Duru to Spanish. And it was so inclusive. We made sure we had interpreters there, and it was so successful. And I was reminded that families want to be involved, but we have to provide families with the access and tools to feel seen and feel valued. During that time, parents and moms, they were shouting louder than the kids. A mom was so hyped and so excited to share that she knew that cat rhymed with bat. Another mom was so excited to share that she understood that cat, the first beginning sound was k. She was so excited. And it was at that moment I realized that while the learning is happening for the kiddos, learning is also happening with the families. And we have to embrace that and be so inclusive to how we show up and support the families and the kiddos, and families that may be learning some of these concepts for the very first time. In addition to what we've already been doing, we realized there was still an opportunity to capture family feedback from the very beginning. So, to honor a two-way partnership in how we work with families, that's what led to the creation of the Waterford Cares Framework, which came from the dissertation work of Dr. Jenny Torres. Her research focused on centering family voices and bringing equity minded practices into Waterford family engagement offerings. Through collaboration with both internal teams, families, she helped shape the CARES framework in a professional learning series for educator that was designed by me and a colleague, Ashley McEwen, to strengthen the relationships with families and caregivers. So, as a part of this work, we launched a community of inquiry, which allowed us to review feedback from families, especially Spanish speaking families, and build a rubric to guide the content and the services. And so, the theory of action behind the CARES framework started with one simple but powerful idea, and it was to listen to what the families have to say. We invited families to share open and unrestricted feedback. What is Waterford.org really good at? What is Waterford.org need some assistance in? And so, after sifting through that unrestricted feedback, about 15 teammates took over 9 hours to reflect and shape and come up with the themes, which is now the CARES framework. And what we really heard and was really clear from families was that families wanted communication. And they want communication that is clear and consistent and not judgmental. Families want academic content that is rigorous, that meets their child at their just right level and reflects who their children are. Families also want relationships that are built off of trust, which is what Dr. Karen Mapps named, and also Andrea. Families really want trust, and they want a trust from the beginning. I think as educators, again, like, we sometimes think, oh, I'm the educator, you're supposed to trust me. Not necessarily. The same trust that is given is this, and sometimes the same trust that's going to be received. Families also want expectations that are realistic and genuine, but also are supportive. And families also want support, whether it's related to technology during the implementation. So at Waterford, we believe that these 5 areas remind us to be able to strengthen the protective factors around children and set them up for lifelong learning of success. This work started, honestly, because we knew that curriculum and programming should not happen in isolation. Families bring valuable perspectives, cultural knowledge, and experiences that shape the way that kiddos learn. It makes it more engaging and relevant and effective. So when we actively include their voices, we're not just building content, we're building a strength-based mindset. And that is a journey, and it's essential to all of our partners. So this is an example of what the rubric would look like. So let's say there's a CARES session, and educators would receive a rubric that's aligned to each CARES competency. Today we'll look at support. And so this is what it would look like. And families would essentially grade or give that feedback around, okay, so this is what support looks like from my teacher, from my district, from my school. Then educators would look at that data and ask themselves, what stands out? What barriers are my families experiencing? What do I need to do differently? This is my favorite slide. And here's why, right? So it shows that real, honest feedback that we receive from families in a Waterford Cares cohort. And so the school sends out a CARES survey, and families respond with openness and that unrestricted feedback. And while it may not always be what we want to hear, it's what we need to hear to do the work that our families deserve to have. And so my favorite comment is, the office manager is rude when speaking to parents. She is not helpful when you are new and you are trying to figure things out. I know she's been here for forever, but I haven't. That comment is a reminder that every single interaction matters, right? If that is the first interaction that that family has, what do they now think about the rest of the school, or their child's teacher? Like, they have no idea. Now it's a negative partnership, essentially. And so this is an opportunity to say every interaction matters, whether it's in the cafeteria, the pickup line, at a family literacy night, whatever the case may be. And so this is where the CARES framework can help us in pause. How are we showing up? Are we making families feel seen and welcome? And are we giving them space to share what they need and truly listening to understand instead of listening to respond? This isn't about calling people in, it's an invitation to reflect, grow, and do better to build authentic relationships. We're going to progress and go into our group discussion, but I want to create a space for you all to scan these QR codes to learn more about the family engagement offerings, but also some family engagement resources. Thank you so much. And again, it's now time for the group discussion. I'm going to give you 10 more seconds to scan if you please.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Yes, I look forward to Karen joining Kiera and Andrea and I to really have a conversation. It's some really important things that we've been hearing just now. I think, Karen, you talked about family engagement, that we must know the why, the what, and the how. And I'm familiar with some of your work. I wonder if you can give us a quick story about the how and how you've seen family engagement work and be effective, and how it was done and the impact on children.
Well, I'm actually here in Verona at the the Europe Family Engagement Conference. And I'm here with my colleague, Dr. Sade Harris, who's the former Chief of Engagement for the Richmond Public Schools. And one of the examples I have is that, as you all know, after COVID, a lot of our districts experienced a serious drop in attendance. And some of them are still struggling with that. So Richmond was one of them who had a chronic absenteeism challenge. But Sade, who was one of my former students, so she's been trained in the dual capacity framework, she used the framework as the blueprint to design a program of engagement around chronic absenteeism, because what she would tell you is that they didn't have an absenteeism problem, they had a relationship problem. And so consequently, what they did was they changed the more punitive nature of the way that they handled absenteeism to an engagement place where they really work with families and ask families, tell us what you need. Like, what are the things and supports that you may need to get your child to school? Are there other things standing in the way? So instead of, a probation officer showing up at the house and saying, look, your kid's not in school, this is what's going to happen, they changed those positions to what they called family liaisons, and they were community liaisons who knew a lot of the community supports and services in the neighborhoods. They would visit with families and say, listen, we want to help you. In some cases, the issue was around housing. In some cases, the issue was around transportation, around childcare. So by doing that and working with families and not doing things to them, but doing things with them in a loving way, because they actually had a slogan saying, we love you here in Richmond. That was a slogan. It was on t-shirts. It was everything, where they said, we love you and we want to do what we can to help support you. What did they see? They saw absenteeism drop, in some cases at some schools, by double digits. So that's how we use, engagement, again, as a strategy, and not seeing it as just a public relations, dynamic, or again, well, we just want to make nice with our families, but not really connecting it to anything. So that's really where we see the mindset shifted, seeing families as assets instead of through a deficit-based lens, seeing families as partners. They were really able to make a real difference. And while we were even here, Dr. Harris got a notice. She's since left Richmond. She's doing her own thing called Groundwork. And, she got a notification that the chronic absenteeism rate went down again in Richmond because of the family engagement work.
That is a wonderful story. Andrea, I see that you have some reflections on the things you've heard your colleagues say today.
I think it's very validating to hear the research, to hear the practices, and speaking after Dr. Mapp was fantastic. So thank you, CAYL, for this, just the structure and framework of this, because it really connects the theory to practice. And I also noticed that there are some questions coming up in the chat about how do we do this? So at NAFCC, we always really lift up this message, this philosophy of many right ways. And I say that because I don't want to give you a formula to say, well, this is how you're going to be doing family engagement. It needs to be organic. It needs to be authentic. So I can speak from what I have seen different educators do in this space. For example, Lindelia's program, she noticed that some of the families coming out of the pandemic, a lot of their children were struggling with behavioral issues, were struggling with communicating. Some of them were diagnosed and on the spectrum. So what did she do? She was advocating for, we need to bring support to the families. I'm going to open up my space. I'm going to open up my program so that we can get community-based organizations, therapists to come here and do their work here. Not only that, we're not going to stop there. I also want to bring specialists into my program so that they can speak one-on-one with families. So let's talk about workshops. So she's looking, and again, I wanna make sure that we understand this. These are small home-based programs. These are small businesses. The educators are thinking really intentional about what can I do here to support and develop the families with the goal of supporting and developing young children. So for Linelia, it was thinking innovatively and bringing the community to them, bringing the resources and services to the families in her program. Other programs, what I have seen is, and Dr. Mapp also mentioned this about what's the foundational knowledge, the wisdom of families. How do we capture that? So families are sharing with their educators, this is what works in my family. This is what the bedtime routine works like or looks like in my home. And that's really helpful information, especially for the little ones that FCC educators are working with. They're young, they have a very specific routine. And this is done again intentionally so that ease that transition into their homes. That is something that I absolutely recommend every educator and every provider think through, but don't do it just as a checklist. Couple it with a tailored conversation. Hey, I read about XYZ. I see that your daughter is really interested in magnet tiles. What types of magnet tiles? What do you usually use? Et cetera, et cetera. So it can't just be complete this checklist, complete this questionnaire, and then provide it to me. I'll put it away in a folder and never look at it again. We need to think about ways to intentionally bring these pieces up and talk about it with families during drop off, during events coming up, et cetera. So again,
Thank
thank you so
you.
much.
Yeah. Kiara, do you have a very quick last word as our time is running out? And we want to make sure everybody has the link so that you can join us in the after party to ask direct questions of our panelists about the why, what, and how. Last word.
Yeah, I just am so privileged to be able to work and do the work that Waterford is so committed to. And so we are really intentional when we are serving our families and being able to understand who are we serving and going to them. And so we have our surveys and we look at those surveys, but we are also listening to the educators and supporting educators and shifting some of their mindsets that could create biases against families. And so the work that waterford.org is doing has been incredible, and we are continuing to do that work through the various aspects of Upstart and family engagement opportunities and our family engagement cohorts. And so I'm just really grateful and proud that we are seeing families and we are advocating for families.
Thank you so much. I want to invite all of you who are listening live to join us at the after party. The after party is an opportunity for you to have questions and answers with our panelists and to raise any concerns or examples. And we also want to encourage you to join us next month. We're going to talk about a really timely, important topic, and that is Project Head Start. We want to know, what is the way forward for Project Head Start? And so we invite you to join us as we talk about this on Thursday, July 10th. And finally, as always, we thank you for learning with the CAYL Institute today. I want to thank all of our staff who are behind the scenes making this webinar series happen. Thank you all, and I will see you at the after party. Good night.